So today here, in this auspicious place, Sarnath, we are gathered to have a discourse on the Dharma. This is the place where Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma. So many millions of people consider this place sacred, and it is a sacred place. So the teaching that we are going to have is on Shantideva, Bodhisattva Shantideva's text, which is most excellent text on the practice of Bodhichitta, the text called Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. Usually, when we talk about Varanasi, it is known for its heat. So today, the weather is telling us that this place cannot even have cold weather like this. So please be warm, have warm clothes on yourself, and take care of your health. The monks should. His Holiness is asking the monks to cover their arms, with their robes. So in the beginning of each Dharma teaching, so for the last 2,500, almost 2,600 years, the Buddha Dharma, the foundation of which is the Pali tradition, which teaches the teachings comprised in the Pali texts teach the three trainings of morality, concentration and wisdom. So we'll have the recitation of Mangala Sutra in Pali.
Bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho viññācarana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manussanang buddho bhagavati swakkato bhagavata dhammo sandetiko akaliko ehipassiko opanaiko paccattang වේදිතබ්බෝ විඤ්ඤෝ හේති සුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ උජුපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ ඥායපටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ සාමීචි පටිපන්නෝ භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ යතිදං චත්තාරි පුරිස යුගානි අට්ඨ පුරිස පුග්ගලා ඒස භගවතෝ සාවක සංඝෝ ආවුනේය පාවුනේයෝ දක්ඛිනේයෝ අංජලි කරණීයෝ අනුත්තරං පුඤ්ඤක්ඛෙත්තං ලෝකං සාති සබ්බීතියෝ විවජ්ජන්තු සබ්බ රෝගෝ විනාශතු මාතේ භවත්වන්තරායෝ සුඛී දීඝායුකෝ භවතු සබ්බ මංගලං රක්ඛන්තු සබ්බ දේවතා සබ්බ බුද්ධානුභාවේන සදා සොත්ති භවන්තු තේ භවතු සබ්බ මංගලං රක්ඛන්තු සබ්බ දේවතා සබ්බ ධම්මානුභාවේන සදා සොත්ති භවන්තු තේ භවතු සබ්බ මංගලං රක්ඛන්තු සබ්බ දේවතා සබ්බ සංඝානුභාවේන සදා සොත්ති භවන්තු තේ.
Thank you. Next, we'll recite the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit. So, recitation of Heart Sutra in Sanskrit. So, Tibetan Buddhism came from so which was brought by Recitations, who was invited by the Tibetan king Tibetan, and also Mahasattva Sambhava helped in the dissemination of Buddhism, establishment of Buddhism in Tibet firmly by overcoming the negative evil forces. And in this way, Buddhism was firmly established on the Tibetan soil. So the Nalanda tradition, which we follow, has the Pali tradition as its foundation, the fundamental teaching or practice, with the Vinaya practice, which are also which we have is similar to the Pali tradition, Vinaya, Pratimoksha Vinaya. There are minor differences, but the basic the main Vinaya practice is same as we have in the Theravada tradition. So many people don't know this, and they think that there's a huge difference between the Mahayana and Hinayana. And therefore, in the Nalanda tradition, the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, is the foundation of Buddhism. And therefore, the practitioners, the people who keep the Pratimoksha vows, keep the fundamental or the foundation of Buddhism. And then we add the higher Mahayana paths. And we have the Abhidhamma in the which come within the Bodhisattva practices, and which are mainly in Sanskrit. And then Master Nagarjuna and others have written their commentaries on these scriptures in Sanskrit as well. And therefore, the Tibetan Buddhism follows the Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism. And within that, the study of logic and epistemology is not in any other tradition like it we have in the Tibetan tradition. And therefore, the Nalanda masters, great scholars, top scholars like of logic and epistemology, such as Dignaka and Dharma Kirti, have written many texts on logic and epistemology. And Chandarakshita himself was a great scholar himself on logic and epistemology, and he has written the text called Tattva Samgraha. And so this is a text on logic and epistemology. So he was a keeper of the tradition of logic and epistemology, and the Dharma that he established in Tibet. We usually refer to this tradition that we have as the two necks of lions yoked, the two necks yoked of lions yoked, which refer to the two lions referring to the epistemology and Madhyamaka. And so we have the text that we study are Abhisamaya, Alamkara by Maitreya and others. So since the founding of this university in Sarnath, we have Tibetans, lay and monastics, and they study Sanskrit here. And so as a result of their study of Sanskrit, they have started since several years. They have started reciting the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, and so today, the group of students and teachers, professors from here will recite the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit. So the Heart Sutra reads, I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on the base of Vulture's Mountain, in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadoti-putra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unseized, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance. and so on up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, and the path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tadyatha gate gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagwan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagwan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadoti Putra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagwan.
Apraptitvena bodhisattvanam pragyaparamitam ashritya viharati chittavarna nastitvadrasto viparyasati kranto nishtanirvana tredo vyavastita sarvabuddha pragyaparamitam ashritya anutram samyasambodhim visambuddha tasmat yatavya pragyaparamita mahamantra anutra mantra asamasama mantra sarvadukha prashamana mantra satyam mityatvat pragyaparamitaayam ukto mantra tadyata gate gate parsamgate bodhi swaha evam Shariputra virayam pragyaparamitaayam charyam shikshitavyam bodhisattvena atha khalu bhagavan tasmat samade vyuthaya aryavalokiteshvarasya bodhisattvasya sadhu karmata sadhu sadhu kulputra evam etat kulputra evam etat gambirayam pragyaparamitaayam charyam chartavyam yatha toya nirdishtam anumodyate tathagate arhatvi samyak sambodhi idam vochat bhagavan Anandamana Ayushman Shariputra Aryavalokiteshvarasya Bodhisattva Sacha Sarvavati Parishat Manushasur Gandharvasya Loko Bhagavato Pashitam Abhyanam.
So first, maybe it's better to say the grace for tea and bread. The qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is inconceivable. So I make this offering to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
다 자동슈.
So for over a month now, I was in South India and then also visiting schools and universities and give talks. And mainly I was giving teaching in Drepung and Garden monasteries. The text which that I taught had many pages to read, and I was quite concerned if I would be able to finish or not, and therefore I really worked hard. So for over 50 hours I gave the teaching within 10 days, trying to finish these, and after that I got cough, and I felt a little bit unhealthy. 진다되더라. The sponsors received blessings from His Holiness, sponsors for the teaching. Now I have recovered quite well, but still I cough occasionally when I talk for some time. So here, people who have gathered for the teaching, we have people who can listen to Tibetan directly, who can understand Tibetan, and then there are people who listens to Hindi translation, so there is a Hindi translation. How many people are there who needs to listen to Hindi? So the Hindi interpreter has not yet arrived. So how many people are there who needs to listen to English? Please raise your hands. Please raise your hands, those who needs to listen to Hindi interpretation.
Those people who need Hindi translation, raise hand.
Yeah. The number of them. And then
need English translation.
Raise your hands.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Two languages, Hindi and English. Very good. Now, can you give what those people
The Chinese
need the Chinese translation, raise hand. Then, where's the Korean translator? Where?
Dedul.
Translator,
Dedul.
where?
Translator.
Okay. Oh. 다 내렸어요. Oh, Russian. Okay. Oh. Very good.
French.
There are some Vietnamese.
Vietnamese. Any Vietnamese
okay.
translation? You have translation in Vietnamese? So as I said before, this is a very special place, sacred site, and the teaching that we are going to have is on the practice or the cultivation of Bodhichitta, the altruistic intention, which holds others more important than oneself, and which is also combined with the practice in combination with wisdom. So such a teaching, to have the opportunity to practice such a teaching is very fortunate, that we are very fortunate. So as the text itself says, today I have found this life, today my life has borne fruit, and so forth. So it's a matter of time, but we all have the opportunity to become a Buddha sometime in the future. So the direct path to Buddhahood is the foundation of this path to Buddhahood is Bodhichitta. So from the time you have the experience, the genuine experience of Bodhichitta, you become a child of the Buddha. And so such a Bodhichitta, which holds others more important than oneself, it's not only that the teaching, the practice or the teaching is very precious, but for oneself, it is when you have this altruistic mind, then all your goals, temporary and ultimate, are fulfilled. Without this, if you only remain selfish, then live alone, treading along the paths and grounds of Bodhisattvas. But even in this life, if you are only selfish, if you remain selfishly, then you are not at all happy. So it's not only, we are not only talking about Buddhism, but all the major religious traditions which have philosophical background. Whether you use the term or not, but all acknowledge the extreme self-centered attitude is the root of all our problems, thinking only about oneself. So this is what all these major religious traditions which have some philosophical backgrounds acknowledge. So the indication for this is that, for example, in the theistic religion, according to theistic religion, so when the followers keep their faith in God as the creator, then they develop the sense of submitting oneself to that creator, and that in turn helps to reduce one's self-centered attitude. And then, and all these religious traditions, major religious traditions with philosophical background, all of them teach love, compassion. So all these religions have this practice of love and compassion, and therefore altruistic attitude is the root of happiness, whereas extreme self-centered attitude is ruinous to oneself and others. And therefore, if you think carefully, all human beings should be aware of this fact. And then the non-theistic religions teach that pain and pleasure come from causes and conditions, and therefore, so you are the creator of the causes and conditions. and therefore it's up to on your shoulder what you experience as a result. And then also there's the teaching of love and compassion, the practice of love and compassion, and therefore the more you help others, benefit others, the greater benefit you draw, great happiness you draw. Whereas if you harm others, if you deceive others, if you bully others, and then by doing this, as a result of it, you get suffering. So this is explained according on the basis of the understanding of law of causality. And therefore, in Buddhism, there are pain and pleasure. You are the doer of your own pain and pleasure. And therefore, all the major religious traditions which have philosophical backgrounds acknowledge that altruism is very important. According to Buddhism, how you actually help others, serve others, is not only thinking of being to be free from the painful experience, which is called suffering and suffering, but you also think of overcoming all these types of sufferings, the conditioning suffering of samsara, which is rooted in turn in the ignorance, delusions, afflictive emotions, and also their remnant imprints. And therefore, so there's nothing greater to practice than holding others as more important than oneself, the practice of Bodhichitta. And therefore, Shantideva says, if you do not exchange one's happiness with others' suffering, you will not attain Buddhahood, leave alone reaching Buddhahood, but even while in samsara, you will never be happy. And therefore, so looking at all sentient beings and being compassionate and affectionate to them, and when you compare the others' happiness and suffering and one's own happiness and suffering, you consider the happiness of others more important than oneself, and therefore you think of taking on the suffering of others and giving them happiness, and therefore there is the you exchange your happiness with the suffering of others, and therefore because the others are more important than oneself. And secondly, the more you help others, you draw benefits long-term and the short-term. So this is the best means of happiness for oneself. Therefore, Shantideva says, the Buddhas who have thought about this for eons and eons have found only this to be the most beneficial. So the means of helping others, the best means to help others is bodhicitta, is what Shantideva says. And therefore, the fact that we have this opportunity to engage in the teaching, I feel myself very fortunate, and also you having the opportunity to listen to the teaching, you should feel fortunate. So the organizers have asked me what I have asked them it would be very good if they could publish the text. So do you have the text with you? English translation is also there.
Hindi translation. Hindi translation also is there. Have you? Hindi translation? No. Hindi translation. This book? I think there's both English translation and Hindi translation. I think both. Oh, yeah,
So if you have the text, then
최소야기
so regarding Dharma,
취준 가실 수화제
it's not about attending some sessions of teaching and thinking that you have received some blessings. That's not how we go about with Dharma practice. Even in education, a teacher who is learned may teach a class one time and then be satisfied with that. And the students feel satisfied with that. But you have to study from kindergarten up to university, and then finally get a PhD degree. So you have to move higher and higher in your education. And similarly, in the practice of the Dharma, we first engage in listening to the teaching and studying, and develop the wisdom bone from study and listening, and then you also develop the wisdom arising from reflection. And then, having reflected on the teaching over and over again, you find certainty about the meaning of the teaching, so that you clear away the doubts. And then you have this incontrovertible understanding. And so the wisdom drawn from reflection is a valid cognition, inferent and inferential valid cognition. You should not stay there even, but you have to go further to have the real experience. And therefore, whatever certainty you have found about the teaching, you have to familiarize your mind with it and become accustomed to it, so that your mind actually transforms into whatever meditation you are doing. In the case of the subjective, what is known as the subjective aspect. So, for example, the selfish mind should be transformed into holding others to be more important, cherishing others. And then, if you are meditating on things like impermanence, then your mind should be you should familiarize your mind with that object, the impermanence, and gain clear understanding, insight into the impermanent nature of things, which is to say, you develop the understanding with respect to the objective aspect. And therefore, you have to go through the hearing or listening to the teaching, and then reflection, and then meditation. You have to draw these wisdoms arising from hearing, reflection, and meditation. And so, in this way, you have to make transformation within yourself, so that when you face some difficult situation, it will not sway you. For example, as it is said in this prayer, when I'm happy, I will dedicate my happiness for the others' benefit, and dedicate your merit for the benefit of others who are infinite, like the space. So may happiness and benefit fill the space. You should not feel proud or arrogant and bully others or demean others, belittle others when you have happiness. So your experience of happiness should not become a cause to give rise to afflictive emotions, but you have to think about helping and developing more causes of happiness. When you are suffering, you should not lose your heart at all, becoming helpless or hopeless. But think that, just like yourself, there are so many other sentient beings who are limited like the space, who have suffering. And you should think of taking on the suffering of others as well. And therefore, this is how you practice the transforming the bad circumstances into the path to enlightenment. And so, as this prayer says, when I am suffering, may I take on the burden of suffering of others, and may the ocean of suffering dry up. So if you are able to live your life according to these principles of thinking of helping others and overcoming their suffering, and such a person would be heroic, courageous, and full of wisdom. So you would be someone who is called a being of great capacity, a great being. And Shantideva says, I pay respect to one who has generated bodhicitta and the source of all happiness. So I'm not, when I say these things, I'm not trying to indicate that I have a great experience of bodhicitta or I'm somebody special or anything like that. But I have a very genuine admiration for bodhicitta, and I also think about bodhicitta on a daily basis, and as a result of it, I can see that my life is happier. So therefore, I can say for the 100% confidence that if you have the experience of bodhicitta, genuine bodhicitta, then your life will be happy. Happiness, the true happiness will set in within you. Otherwise, if you are famous or powerful with authority, I mean, these can also become causes for your own ruin. But even if you may be very knowledgeable and you may still belittle others, I mean, look down on others and cause rift in others. So you cause ruin to others as well. But if you have some experience of bodhicitta, then regarding yourself alone, so it would be quite sure that you will be able to accomplish your short-term and long-term goals. Even small insects would become your friends. So what we consider to be favorable conditions for us, like food, shelter, and clothing, and also knowledge and intelligence, expertise, and it's doubtful whether these will actually bring about true happiness. But if you have this altruistic intention, then it's certain that you will have happiness. So while you are alive, you meditate on, cultivate bodhicitta, and when you are about to die, when you can think about bodhicitta, and you'll be very happy. You can die happily, peacefully, and in the next life, it's 100% sure that you will gain a life form where you will continue to cultivate bodhicitta. And therefore, the Maitreya says bodhicitta helps to avert the path to the birth to lower realms, and it shows the path to higher rebirth. And therefore, all of us are fortunate to have to be able to engage in the teaching and therefore, while listening to the teaching, you should have the correct motivation on the part of the teacher. I should not have arrogance or a competitive feeling or jealousy and belittling others, but I should have the genuine sense of helping others. And then you, the audience, should also, after listening to the teaching, you should not think that, oh, you have received the teaching. I have received this teaching on Bodhisattva Charyavatara 4 or 5 times from the Dalai Lama, just to be able to count how many times you have received the teaching. But then there may be some who may try to, after having received teaching from me, after they may go out and teach others. But their main motivation is to have money, wealth, and some kind of servants, people attending to them. So if you do this, then instead of the Dharma helping you, and it would be rather misuse. You'll be misusing it. So this is not good. You should not do it. So if we are not careful, we might indulge disguising as Dharma practitioners. We might deceive others in for wealth, money, and then there are people who do business with the Dharma. So when you do this, then instead of the Dharma actually turning as a Dharma practice, it would turn into a non-Dharma practice. Therefore, let's have the correct motivation of benefiting others. And for this, we'll recite the verse of taking refuge and Bodhichitta. So you say, until I'm enlightened, I will take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So the purpose of taking refuge in the three jewels is not to have very good facilities and favorable conditions in this life, nor to have a higher rebirth in the next life, nor should you have the motivation to become simply liberated from samsara, but you should take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in order to reach enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the benefit of all others. Therefore, you say, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, the Supreme Assembly. So here, when the term Supreme Assembly is used, it refers to of the three jewels. It refers to the Sangha of the Mahayana tradition. And so the Dharma is the Dharma for attaining omniscience, the Mahayana Dharma, and then the Buddha who has attained the enlightenment of Mahayana. And so here, when we say this prayer, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you are taking refuge in the Mahayana way. And then by the accumulations I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, shows Bodhichitta. So the purpose of taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I'm enlightened, you have said that. Now, the means that leads you to Buddhahood is the 6 perfections, such as morality, perfection of morality, generosity, and so forth. And therefore, you are saying the accumulations, such as generosity, the 6 paramitas, such as generosity, and may all of them become not just for yourself to reach lasting happiness for yourself alone, but in order to become a cause for the benefit of all other sentient beings, so that you become a Buddha. And so, with these lines, what is shown is that the principle of taking refuge, which differentiates the practice from non-Buddhist traditions, and then the Mahayana practice of Bodhichitta, which distinguishes the path from the lower ones. So usually in the prayer, in the 3rd line, there is sometimes the mention of by the accumulation of merit, but that includes only the method part of the practice. So it would be good to include even the wisdom. So having said that, I take refuge until I'm enlightened. When you have a very good understanding of what enlightenment means, so if you have a good understanding of emptiness, then you will have a good understanding of what that enlightenment refers to. So the Bodhi or Changchup, enlightenment, translated as enlightenment, refers to purifying all the negativities and having the full knowledge. So what you purify, when you purify the negativities and the negative emotions, and the root of which is ignorance, which views things to have some true existence. This ignorance misperceives the reality. So such a misperception, misconception, in order to be aware of it, its nature, then you have to know the reality. Otherwise, you will not understand, you will not become aware that it is ignorance. And therefore, if you first understand that things are merely in name and merely designated, so whether it's external phenomena or our own internal experiences, they appear to have some objective existence, some kind of independent existence. Therefore, reality or suchness so the suchness or reality here refers to the fact that things do not have any objective independent existence apart from being merely designated. As you find in the Heart Sutra, the five aggregates also are empty of intrinsic nature. So if you are not able to have some understanding of this nature, this reality, then you will not be able to know the path leading to a purified state of Buddhahood. And similarly, when you say, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, you have this word, I. Again, what we have, the notion of this I, is that there is some kind of a solid, independent I, and therefore you have to understand that there is no such a way of existence of an I. And then also in the next two lines you say, by the accumulations I create. Again you mention I. And when you should again think of this I. When we fight with others or quarrel with others, we actually make this strong distinction between you and me. But where is this I? You may point it to the brain, but that is not I. One very expert scientist, brain scientist, told me that when he did his research, through his research, he said there's no I or a soul which governs the person within the brain. So he's not a Buddhist, nor maybe a religious person. So as a brain scientist, he said the functioning of the brain is such that all the neurons work in connection with each other, but there is no soul which commands the person. So he drew a brain pattern and then explained this to me. So there is no soul or a self which governs the person. If such a thing As if the self were there, then it should be within the brain, but it's not there because the brain actually work. The neurons work together. So he said there is no such governing on self or soul within the brain. So in Buddhism, we talk about selflessness. So there are those who say that there should be an objectively existing I. And when you do philosophical inquiry into the I, and then the philosophers come to the conclusion that it is within the five aggregates, and amongst the five aggregates, of course, it's not the body, and therefore they go to the mind to posit the self. And within the mind, again, we have the mind's states of mind during the waking state, and then dreaming state, and then deep sleep state. And when you go into the innermost subtle mind, you cannot have anything that you can pinpoint as being the self. So from the top of your body down to the sole of your feet, you cannot find anything that you can say as being the self, not within the mental consciousness even. And therefore, when you say, I take refuge until I'm enlightened, and by the accumulations I create, may I become, when you think about this I, there is nothing that you can point to as being that there. But this is not to say that we are talking about nihilism. There is a person, a self. We have the self of a Buddha and the Sangha, the community, which go through changes and effects. And so, because we cannot find under analysis within the five aggregates how this I exists is merely by name, in designation. And therefore, when you say, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, think that this I is merely designated, merely nominal, and there's nothing objectively existing. And when you say, by the accumulations I create, think that this I does not exist intrinsically, but merely by way of designation. So when you meditate like that, then you will be it serves as a cause for the accumulation of wisdom to a certain extent. And therefore, with this understanding, please say these 4 lines, thinking of the meaning as best as you can. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through the generosity and so forth, may I become Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulations I create through generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Pay homage to the Gautama, who out of his compassion taught the holy Dharma to rid us of all views, wrong views. So with regard to this text, the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, I received the teaching on it from the Kinori master, Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen, in Bodh Gaya. So that was the first teaching I had from him was a teaching on his own writing, the Praise to Bodhichitta, jewel lamp in Varanasi, in Sarnath, where when he was staying in a Hindu temple, very poor house, a room, and he told me that was a very good place to stay. It was very quiet, he said, and I felt very sad, and I cried a lot at that time. So that was my first teaching from Kono Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen. And then I received many other teachings from him. And so he was a great Lama. So as I said before, I forgot to complete what I was saying. So this text has been published by the organizers. So not only can the people who have come to the teaching can read it during the teaching, and feel fortunate to have received the teachings, but so I will give mainly transmission of the text, reading transmission, and then give explanations here and there. And then, because you have the text, you should read. Whenever you have time, read a chapter. On a daily basis, you can read some part of this text. And when you have more time, when you have leisure, then read the text and also reflect on the meaning. And if you do meditation, it would be very helpful, very beneficial. And especially when the practical advice is found in the 6th chapter, chapter on patience, and 8th chapter on concentration. So if you can read these 2 chapters sometimes when you have leisure, and especially when you are overcome with when you feel disturbed, mentally disturbed, these 2 chapters will be very helpful. Even if you may be non-believer, who does not believe also in the rebirth. So if you think about the meaning of these 2 chapters, it would be very helpful. The 6th chapter. So this text, when you return to your own place, don't lose it, so that you are not aware where it is in your room. So this text should be always with you, inseparable. So read it every day, and then when you have leisure, more time, think over. There are many people who do daily yoga practice or practices based on the prana, chakras, and nadis. So there are very few who would say they are actually doing meditation on the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. So one time I was in Dharamsala when somebody from Tibet came to me and asked me to give a teaching or transmission of the verse of taking refuge and Bodhichitta. Otherwise, I meet people who ask me to give a transmission of the 6-syllable mantra or the mantra of Tara and so forth. I felt very happy for him, and I told him it was very good for him to request me this. So it would be helpful to you also to go through the text and meditate on the different points. So I wish to give you an introductory teaching first. So we have people, Tibetans, and also people from the Himalayan regions of, and also especially people who have come from Tibet, the new arrivals, where in Tibet we have it's very difficult and very few people who give teachings and explain Buddha Dharma. And there's so much restriction on the Dharma, religion, and therefore, so you have come here once, and please listen carefully. And then those who have come from places where Buddhism didn't used to be your traditional religion, many of you have come here, and also people from Korea and China, and Chinese have come here. So if you become aware, if you know the situation in general, it would be good. Therefore, I usually give the introduction to Buddhism, and then having done the introductory teaching on Dharma, then I give the teaching on the Buddhism. So to start with the introduction, without having to use reasoning to prove things, something, there are over 7 billion people in this world. All of us do not want happiness, but do not want suffering, but want happiness. We are all same. So we are all same in not wanting suffering, but wanting happiness. There's nobody who wants problems. I usually say this. People who are amidst problems and troubles, who are amidst all kinds of problems, when they wake up in the morning, they would wish if there could be less trouble today. And there's nobody who would think that may there be a wish to have more troubles, more problems during the day. So, whether we talk about the north and the south, or east and west, or materially highly advanced countries or underdeveloped countries, many of the problems are created by humans. The scientists even say that the environmental crisis also is because of the greed of human beings. And because of this greed, we pollute and destroy the environment, and also the smoke from the industries and factories also affect the climate of the world. And so these are human creations. So we all know, we talk about dirty politics. And sometimes these days we even talk about Lama politics and religious practitioners' politics, and then there's politics amongst the different religions. So politics has become synonymous with problems. So all these problems that we face are man-made, and they are not natural. So in political field, you need religious spiritual principles to so the religions are not meant for creating problems, but to help people. But the politicians who are involved in politics use it wrongly, and therefore the religions they use becomes a means for creating more problems, whereas religion is meant for making internal transformation. They use it in such a way that they create more rift and conflict amongst groups. And even amongst Tibetans, we are all same follower of the same teacher, Buddha, Shakyamuni, but we make difference, we differentiate between this and that follower of this and that religion on the basis of our hats. So the means, which is for taming our mind, when it is used for creating more problems within us, attachment and aversion, then the religion, as we say, is turned into evil. And so many problems that we face in the world are man-made. And therefore, the developed countries, there are many people who are full of emotions and jealousy and so forth, biased. And then because of such environments, then many youth, young people find things to be hopeless. And there are suicide cases. And this morning I heard news on the BBC. In Kazakhstan, suicidal cases increasing. Just this morning I heard this news. And then in many places like Japan, for example, there are young people who commit suicide, and then similarly it happens in China and America and everywhere. So without compassion for each other, people bully each other. And recently there was this rape case in Delhi. So these don't happen because of there being no rule, no constitution or law, but people also have freedom. But this is because of untamed or undisciplined mind and having no respect for others, no affection and love for others. And therefore, in this world, all the 7 billion people don't want suffering but want happiness. Therefore, we have to think about what brings about causes and what brings about suffering. So with regard to pain and pleasure, there are those which are physical and mental, and those which are mental. So the physical ones, when you have extreme intense pleasure based on the sensory pleasures, sensory experiences, then we find very urgency in overcoming the suffering. And therefore, there has been this material progress and advancement. Of course, we still need material development and progress because there are so many poor people. But material advancement alone cannot bring about true happiness in human beings. So we have to raise this question whether it will bring about such true happiness. So I have friends who are very wealthy, but as an individual, they are very unhappy. Although they have wealth, as we usually talk about the wealth god, Vaishravana. I mean, they have wealth which can compare to the wealth of Vaishravana, but they are very unhappy as individuals. If you look around your neighborhood, you will find that people who are less wealthy are more friendly with each other and happier. But when people gain more wealth and become more wealthier, then there is greater greed and more suspicion, more hope, and then jealousy, competitive feeling, and then jealousy develops. And because of this, people cannot trust each other, and then people remain lonely. Although they have all amenities, all necessities of life, but as individuals they remain very lonely. This loneliness. And therefore, these days, scientists, medical scientists and neurobiologists, many of them say that when you have peace of mind, then you are physically also you are healthier. If your mind is disturbed all the time, then this also causes ulcer and cancer. So when you are full of anxiety, then some scientists say that people who are angry often or have resentment or fear, then these states of mind actually diminish our immune system, weakens our immune system. Whereas if you have peace of mind, then this state of mind can actually maintain our immune system and even can strengthen the immune system. And so this is not only just believing, but they are saying this from their research. For example, they give training to people for about 3 weeks to meditate on love, compassion, and training of the mind, to check their mind. So for 2 or 3 weeks, and each day the participants are led to meditate for half an hour or an hour. So before starting such programs, the scientists first check their blood pressure and then the level of stress, fear, anxiety. And after having done that, then they let the participants to do the meditations on love and compassion and so forth. And they have, of course, instructions, and then the participants follow the instructions and do meditation. And at the end of the program, they again check the blood pressure. When they check the blood pressure and anxiety and fear, they find them to have reduced. And because of this reduction, the participants also become happier, relaxed, and become more friendly with each other. So this is what the scientists say. So this is what the scientists have found in some renowned American universities. So as I said before, it's okay even if you may not believe in a religion, but because we want happiness, not suffering, now all of us want health, good health, physical health. So if you want physical health, it is important to have mental health. Just letting yourself be overcome with all kinds of negative emotions will not bring your good health. So the main practice of the means to bring about, method to bring about the health in mind, healthy body is by developing a healthy mind. So, of course, if you go around the city of Varanasi and tell some beggars who need food and tell them to meditate or cultivate compassion, they will say, I'm actually suffering from hunger first. So, when you actually deal with the practice of the Dharma, then, of course, you should have the necessities of life, but you should not only focus on material development, whereas the current education system is such that it focuses more on material development alone, but not on the mind. development of the mind. So for several centuries, this has been the case. And now we, in this 21st century, we, of course, the material development has helped us to have better physical comfort, but it's missing something, and therefore we have to include in the curriculum training of the mind. And many educationists also today say this, that the current educational system lacks moral principle, education on moral principles. This is what is lacking. So many people say this. So we have come to such a juncture. Therefore, with regard to happiness, all the religions become important. For the last 3,000 or so years, all these religious traditions, the various religious traditions have helped to give mental happiness and also given hope to many people. That they have been very beneficial. They are still helpful to millions of people. The Christian followers, there are about 100 million, and then Muslims also the same kind of number. Then there are Hindus, who are the 600 Hindus, and then Buddhists, 200 million. And then in China, it is said that the number of Buddhists are increasing. So it's said that the number has reached about 300 or 400 millions. So there are many of all these different religious traditions which give hope to the people. But at the same time, recently there was some news in the newspapers. Amongst the 7 billion people, about 1 billion do not have any religious belief. And therefore, because they have no interest in the religions, therefore they also think they neglect the principles of love and compassion. That is wrong. Whether you have believe in religion or not is an individual choice. But with regard to love and compassion, as long as you are a human being who is born from our parents, especially our mother, and who are mammal, this love is something, a part of our biology. It's a biological factor. And therefore, we must pay attention to and value love and compassion. This is very important. And therefore, even non-believers should be aware that love and compassion help others as well as your health, for your good life, your good family, and good society, happy society. They must be aware of this. And then, so 1 billion people in this world are non-believers, and then the remaining 6 billion are supposed to be believers. But if we check closely, those who actually are attached to their religions may not become true religious practitioners. They may say, I'm Christian or Muslim and so forth. But they disregard the practices of love, honesty. So while saying they believe in some religion, if they don't follow the principles that are taught in religion, then they are not sincere followers. So half of the 6 billion are not sincere believers. They don't have real interest in their teachings, their religious faith, but they consider their faith as some kind of a custom. They're more interested in the rituals, but not using the religious principles in their day-to-day life. So there are people amongst the Tibetans as well as the Himalayan regions, people from the Himalayan regions. People wear robes, monastic robes, and it's very questionable whether you are keeping your moral ethics or not. But there are many people who actually do not live up to the monastic way of life. So what this shows is that they are not aware that love and compassion is helpful to others and to live a good life even for oneself. So therefore, it is very important for us to make other people aware of the importance and the benefit of love and affection, compassion. And with that as the basis, then for non-believers and then for the believers also, your religious practice will become rather very practical. And therefore, through the educational curriculum, we should promote, I think it's very important to promote love and compassion, including it in our educational curriculum. So love and compassion, we should promote love and compassion, making people aware of its benefit and importance in our educational system. And then the second level, for believers, they should actually make their religions real religious practice, practical. So I have many Christian friends who are, of course, there are many Christians who dedicate themselves to the welfare of others. And also there are people, Muslims also. And then we have examples in the followers of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, of course, is no more, but her Sisters of Charity, they look after very poor people very well. In nearby Tibetan settlements, in remote Indian villages, there are Christian nuns and monks who work in hospitals, clinics, and also set up schools in these Indian villages nearby our Tibetan settlements. We are, of course, refugees, but we do not have lamas and geishas who are doing this kind of social service. So with regards to social service and education, of course, the Christianity is doing very well. Of course, sometimes they actually involve in conversion to Christianity. So their dedication and their courage to do this come from their own religious faith. And therefore, we can see it's very clear that all the religions teach us have the same message of love and compassion. But philosophically, of course, we have differences between the Christianity and Islam. There's differences. Then between Buddhist and non-Buddhist, of course, there are differences. and some are nihilists, some are eternalists. And then there are those who, within the theistic religions, there are those who believe in a soul. And then Buddhism teaches the interdependent nature of things and say that all the followers of Buddhism say that there is no permanent single autonomous self. But then within Buddhist philosophical schools, amongst Buddhist philosophical schools, there are the four philosophical schools. And within amongst them, there are differences as to what the self is. So philosophically, there are big differences amongst all these religious traditions, but all have the message of love and compassion. With regard to the theistic religions, they say that by trusting God, the Creator, then it helps to reduce this extreme self-centered attitude. So these different philosophical ideas, how did they develop in the religious traditions? In the last 3,000 years or 4,000 years or so, in different places, Middle East and in India, in Africa, in Latin America, and China, in each of these countries and regions, we have different religious traditions that have developed. And in Japan, they have their traditional religion of Shintoism. So the different philosophical traditions have developed according to the different regions, the climate, and also way of life of the people. And this which also makes a difference in people's thinking, and therefore we have the different philosophical traditions. But their purpose, the goal is to develop warm heart. And the theistic religions say the God is infinite love, and we have to cultivate warm hearts towards others. And so these philosophical principles also help to develop this, and therefore religious traditions help. So according to the mental dispositions of different people, the varieties of different mental dispositions, we need different philosophical concepts. Because of the philosophical differences, we should not actually indulge in prejudice, and bias, bigotry. So of course the situation is becoming better these days with regards to friendliness between amongst the different religious traditions. In the name of religion, of course, we should not indulge in separation and conflict amongst religions. So India is a good example for that. For thousands of years, India has been home to all the major religious traditions of the world. So there are those homegrown religious traditions like Sankhya tradition, and then the rest of the non-Buddhist traditions. And then in Bihar, I was in Bihar the last few days. So Bihar state has many places where the Buddha actually worked. And then Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, also was born in Bihar. And then there was Guru Nanak, and the Sikhism came up in this religion, in this country, and then religions which have come from outside, like Zoroastrianism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, also have settled well in this country on an equal par with the homegrown religions. So with regard to Zoroastrianism, I'm quite amazed. The population in Bombay of Parsis is less than maybe 100,000. But they live very peacefully, without any fear in India. And so India, the Aryavarta, land of the noble beings, is a role model for the rest of the world, for religious harmony. Of course, there are problems here and there, pockets of problems here and there, which is quite understandable. There's over 1 billion population, and so this is quite natural. It's quite natural to have pockets of people giving problems, creating problems. And so India is an example for religious harmony, a very good example. And then, when it comes to Buddhism, with regard to Buddhism, it does not believe in a creator God. Jainism also does not believe in a creator, and also Sankhya, non-theistic Sankhya school. And so what they believe in is the law of causality, the evolution, and then the abiding and finally destruction of the universe is explained on the basis of law of causality. It's similar to Darwinian theory of evolution. So we talk about the 4 elements, very subtle elements, and then from them comes the water and so forth. And so the wind element developed, which has the quality or the attributes of movement and lightness. And from that comes the heat. And then the obstruction, nature of obstructions. And so we talk about Big Bang, which is said to be the origin of this world. So there are many galaxies. The more powerful the telescopes become, the scientists are able to see more galaxies, so it's infinite. We talk about the Chilocosm or something like that. In Buddhism, there are these numbers, Rabjam Gyatso, and you, first you, second you, and so forth. And so in our text, we find mention of the number of world systems being, like the number of the sand particles in the Ganges River. So this is true. So there is the process of evolution of the universe, and then also the destruction, the dissolution of it. So starting with the wind element and developing up to the earth element, and then finally dissolving back from the earth element to fire and so forth, down to the wind element and space. I'm not sure about how it's explained in Jainism, but they, of course, generally speaking, they don't believe in a creator God, but they believe in law of causality. Today, many brain scientists, some of them do not believe do not accept consciousness or mind. They only believe that mind is a product or of the brain, emergent property of brain.
레벨 중어놓고 요약이 그냥
So there are some scientists who accept that because of through mind mental training of mind, we can actually impact the brain, and so brain activity can be actually brought about by the training of through the training of mind, and so. Perhaps there are Western religious practitioners also who may go through this process of staying in what we call Tukdam. So in some cases, after death, clinical death, there are Tibetan masters. Of course, according to science, brain death is the final death of a person. But even after brain death, there are, in the last 50 plus years of our exile, there have been amongst Tibetans that have come to our notice, there have been people, about 20 people who have stayed in the meditation after clinical death. And then now we have started doing some investigation into this phenomenon through scientifically. So according to science, there is no more consciousness left after brain death. But now we have begun to do some research, investigation into this phenomenon of Tukdam. So there is the mind, which is not matter, not inanimate. But from our experience, we know that the changes go on in the consciousness or mind. And this is by default because of causes and conditions. And within the causes and conditions, we have the substantial cause and the contributing factors, conditions. And it works in the external world as well as the internal world of mind. We have these two, the substantial cause and the contributing conditions. So with regard to the mind, the contributing factors can be physical organs and so forth, but then the substantial cause cannot be these physical things, matter, but it must be consciousness. Just as in the matter comes from substantial cause, which is the matter, similarly, the mind, which has the feature of cognition and clarity, and has its substantial cause, a consciousness, which has the same nature, and therefore this is by default, and therefore there is no beginning of the mind. If there is a beginning to the mind, then it would have to be that beginning has to be some kind of a matter, which is not possible. About 40 years ago, one of my I have come to I've met with a girl, an Indian girl who remembered her past life very clearly, and then another girl also in Kanpur. The Kanpur girl, in fact, have her own parents of this life, and then because of her in her own previous life, the parents of her previous life, where she was a student and died of some sickness. And because of the clarity of the memory of that girl in Kanpur, the two parents of the previous life also came to consider her their own parents. I have not been able to get any update on the situation, but the girl had in those times two parents from this life and two parents from the previous life, and she had been able to remember another life before that, before the last one. Then she would have 6 parents, perhaps. So. So of course, people remember their past life because of their being a past life, and therefore we have more reason to believe in the past life. And those who reject past life, reincarnation, say that there's no mind. They would, of course, when it comes to explaining life or on the basis of the working of brain, there are lots of logical contradiction. There is one part of brain which is called which commands the movement of the body. It's the engine or something like that in the brain, which causes movement. When we have fear or anxiety, when there's an emergency kind of situation, then that brain part moves. Is it amygdala? Motor center. Motor neurons. And then some scientists say that when people have fear, then the blood actually runs more into the legs because you have to run. When people are angry, then you get more blood in the arms. So we usually say when we fight with somebody, we're angry at somebody and want to fight, we actually raise our hands up. And so the scientists explain that our emotions have much connection with the body as well. So when we have anxiety or anger, and then that brain part moves. And when we have compassion also, that same brain part moves. And then I said at one of the Mind and Life conferences, in that case, the brain is very foolish. When you actually move your body, when you through anger, and when you actually feel moved because of compassion, they are very different mental states. The latter is much calmer state of mind, whereas the former, anger, is a very rough and state of mind. So these two emotions, which are completely different, have the same brain parts which moves when we have these. So therefore I said the brain is very foolish. And when we cry, we have tears. And so tears come when we are very sad. For example, due to the death of our near and dear ones. And then when we are very happy, we also have tears. And then when people are having fun and laughing, they have tears. So with regards to the motivation, the state of the mind, they are very different states. One is very sad state and the other is very happy state of mind. But the physical the eyes are not able to make that difference. So I said that if the eyes were very clever, then when we are happy, the tears should come from the right eye, and when we are sad, the tears should come from our left eye. So that we can say the brain can actually make the distinction between the different states of mind as well. So on a mental level, we have two completely opposite experiences. One is total sadness and sorrow, the other is total happiness. And therefore, many of the explanations based on the workings of the brain can be explained in relation to the rough physical experiences, but not on the in connection with the subtle states of mind. So I've been telling scientists that we have to make difference between conceptual and non-conceptual states of mind, which are very clearly mentioned and explained in Buddhism. So I've been telling that some neuroscientists that when you do very fine research into the brain, we have to be able to make difference between the non-conceptual and conceptual states of mind. There may be difference in the brain itself, which part of the brain works when the non-conceptual and conceptual states of mind actually arise. And so there are many different levels of degree in subtlety of the mind. So when we are in deep sleep or when we have dreams, there are differences in the brain, the working of the brain. So we can check the brain when we have dream or when we have no dream, when the sensory perceptions are not working at all. And so I met some neurobiologists who told me that there is no consciousness apart from the brain. Then I asked them, how does memory actually happen? So this brain is here for one life, but our memory can be actually recalling of a life hundreds of years ago or others. So as I gave the example of the Indian girls, so if you have heard something from somebody, you can even remember that 1,000 years later. And I asked him, how does memory come about? Then he didn't have much explanation, so we just had to stop very formally. So there are scientists who are taking interest in the workings of the mind. So this ties in with reincarnation or rebirth. It's not that reincarnation is there because Buddhists say so, but we have to explain it on the basis of the mind or consciousness, saying that the mind or consciousness has its substantial cause, which is a consciousness. And then there are other factors which actually help the mind to giving rise to the mind. And then in the 400 verses of Aryadeva, there is also mention of people remembering their past life. It's not only Buddhist, but also Jainism and Hinduism. Many of the religious traditions have this belief or explain reincarnation. So the Indian tradition, where there is practice of shamatha and vipassana, single-pointed concentration and insight, and therefore there is more explanation on mind. Whereas theistic religions, where only faith is the main factor to keep faith in the God and so forth, therefore there's not much explanation of mind. In Christianity or Judaism, so in the Indian tradition, where there is the practice of shamatha and also vipassana. Then there is meditations of single-pointed concentration, cultivation of single-pointed concentration, of concentration in formal realms. And then there is also explanation of the pitfalls when you try to develop single-pointed concentration, the pitfalls of mental excitement and laxity. And then there is the state of mind which is developed to differentiate between the higher and lower planes of existence, such as the concentration realms, seeing the concentration realms to be more peaceful, and the desire realm to be more coarse compared to that. And so, where there is samadhi and vipassana traditions, there is more explanation of mind. And this is also the case with Buddhism. There is so much explanation of mind. And then, therefore, amongst the scientists, because there is more new interest in understanding the mind, they find, of course, Buddhism has very extensive explanation of mind, and therefore the different emotions like pride, arrogance, anger, and so forth, and how they are actually, what are the antidotes to overcome them, are taught in Buddhism, and therefore scientists take interest and pay attention to them. Buddhism to learn about these emotions. They are not talking about becoming Buddhists, but they actually take beneficial knowledge from the Buddhist literature and also use them and experiment on others. And then they find the results, practical results from using these techniques that are taught in Buddhism, and therefore they take interest. On the one hand, Buddhism does not believe in created gods, but law of causality. Of course, this law of causality is even accepted by Jains and non-theistic Sankhya followers. But the difference between Buddhism and these two other schools is the doer of pain and pleasure, and the experiencer of the doer of the causes, or the creator of the causes of the pain and pleasure, and the enjoyer of the pain and pleasure. With regard to that, the Jainism and Sankhya believe in a kind of an Atman, whereas Buddhism does not believe in this self. So Buddhism says that things come from causes and conditions, and the self who experiences or creates karma also is dependently arisen, and therefore there's nothing which is independently existent. So when you say that things outside come from causes and conditions, but when it comes to talking about the self who is the experiencer of the different experiences, then when you say there's a soul, that doesn't explain law of causality fully. And therefore, Buddhism is the only religion which talks about interdependent nature of things. And therefore, I usually say Buddhism is about the philosophical view of interdependence and the ethical conduct or practice of non-violence or non-harming. And so, in the practice of not harming others or non-violence, the Buddhism supports it through the reasoning of dependent origination, and therefore this is unique to Buddhism, the dependent origination. So we'll stop here for the morning teaching.